Good afternoon. Welcome to CPOC. Do we have any public speakers?
Yes, we have 3 public speakers. The first is Jason Pinero.
Public speaker. Copy. Public speaker.
Good afternoon, Jill and Ronnie. Thanks for having me speak on CPOC once again. I want to thank you guys for providing us today with the update regarding the L train shutdown. It is more than needed to provide us with update regarding that project. And we want to see a more accurate update regarding Cortlandt Street, Penn Access, and Eastside Access, although that those projects are more needed for the region. So let's have hands on deck. And that's all I have to say for this month.
Next speaker is Omar Vera.
Good afternoon, CPOC. Welcome to the July edition of your committee meeting. And first, I would like to say congratulations on the various Enhanced Station Initiative, ESI projects that are ongoing this year. 4 stations on the 8th Avenue Central Park West line, and now we already have some on 2 stations on the 6th Avenue line, 1 station on the Lexington Avenue line, and now another one on the Lenox Avenue line. We're going fast. I like it. And I visited the 36th and 30th Avenue stations on the Astoria line last month. They look very, very swell. I'm glad we're doing this. Now, the one major critique I have to offer is why can't they have elevators? Or we could say lifts, if you prefer to use British dialect. But in any case, I believe it would work much better if like the ESI stations would be much better if they were accessible for all. But I understand money constraints call it. But still, you did a great job with this. I cannot wait to visit the many stations that are undergoing this much needed and great makeover. I look forward to visiting more of these stations once they're finished completed. Thank you so much, and have a great August recess.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Kevin Zhang.
Hello, good afternoon to Joe Loda and Ronnie Hakem. My name is Kevin Zhang. I would like to request that the MTA Bowery Renovation Station on the Nassau Street line and free in-system transfer from Bowery on the Nassau Street line to Grand Street Station on the 6th Avenue line, because Bowery Station has old subway rope lamp entrances, crumbling in structure, sullying platform edges, excessive red population, difficulty navigating various levels and staircases, numerous leaks, and poor drainage, poor lighting, damaged tiles, inaudible properly address system, peeling paint, general shabby and unpleasant appearance. I can't walk Transfer Street from Bowery Station on the Nassau Street line to Grand Street Station on the 6th Avenue line due to the cold weather. And I don't see the free in-system transfer at Bowery Station on the Nassau Street line and Grand Street Station on the 6th Avenue line, since I walk NYC map and sign at Bowery between Hester Street and Canal Street. Bowery Station on the Nassau Street line needs to be renovation, free transferred from Bowery Station on the Nassau Street line to Grand Street Station on the 6th Avenue line, and install elevators in both directions. Thank you and have a nice day.
That concludes our public speakers.
Thank you. First item of business is the approval of our minutes from the meeting in June 18th. Second, any questions, comments? There being none, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Now on to a report of the committee work plan. Don?
No changes on the work plan.
Okay. On to the New York City Transit Capital Program update. First report is from Branko Kleva on the Sandy Recovery and Resiliency Division program. Branko?
Good afternoon. Thank you. Sonia and I will be presenting the Sandy Recovery and Resiliency Program. And also, we will provide an overview of the Canarsie L-Line Tunnel Reconstruction Project, the Myrtle Viaduct Project, and the Clifton Shop Reconstruction Project. As part of the recovery program, so far we have rehabilitated 7 of the 9 under-river tunnels that were flooded during Superstorm Sandy. Clark Street Tunnel being the most recent, where major work was accomplished during 52 consecutive weekend outages. The Canarsie Tunnel project is under construction, and Rutgers Tunnel project will be awarded after the L-Line tunnel is completed. We repair damages at the Rockaway Park Yard, the Coney Island Yard, and the 148th Street Yard projects are in construction, awarded earlier this year, and 207th Street Yard project is in procurement. Bids for 207th Street were received on July 10th, and we are evaluating the low bidder and expect to award the project by the end of next month. We also completed the reconstruction of the South Ferry Station, which included installation of marine doors at entrances and critical facilities to protect the station from future storms, and we rehabilitated the St. George Terminal in Staten Island. Both of these projects were completed on time and within budget, as were the Greenpoint and Montague Tunnel project. The Montague Tunnel project the tunnel was closed for 13 months to perform similar work that is being planned at the Canarsie Tunnel project. Having a little difficulty with this. Okay. As part of the resiliency program, we are in the process of installing various devices to protect flood-vulnerable street openings, which includes station entrances, vent structures, hatches, and manholes. All of these devices, such as marine door, flex gates, flood walls, and mechanical closure devices, are custom-made for each opening. Vent bays are the most numerous. There are over 2,200 of these openings, which are receiving easily deployable mechanical closure devices. The yard projects include both repair and resiliency work. The resiliency work includes installation of a perimeter wall to protect the yards from future floods. A similar wall is being installed at the Hamels Y facility in the Rockaways, while further protection of the Rockaway subway structure over the Jamaica Bay is being developed. Also, a design-build project to build a new resilient Clifton car maintenance shop in Staten Island is underway, and Sonia will provide additional information about that project.
Branko, quick question for you.
Yes.
On the seals, the 3,500 street-level openings that have been closed off or various different hatches put in place, how far north from the Battery have we gone?
Well, we go as far up as 148th Street, because it depends on how high the ground is above sea level. But most of them are below Canal Street.
Regarding that, it says street level openings. I'm just wondering, we rehab the underwater tunnels. What have we done to make sure that if Sandy happens again, those tunnels won't be flooded from their portals? I mean, some of these portals are going to elevated lines, some don't, but that's...
The tunnels were typically flooded through vent shafts, fan plants,
Okay.
which are at each end of the tunnel. And those we are installing these mechanical closure devices at the gratings where the vents are, so they will be deployed and protected.
How about the Steinway Tunnel? We don't think that would flood
Well,
from...
the Steinway Tunnel...
Which opens up right by the Penn Station.
Yes.
Tunnels, yeah.
There are, we have 3 portals that we are installing protection at. One is the 148th Street yard, one is the 207th Street yard, and the third is the Steinway Tube. and that one is in design.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
As you know, the Canarsie Tunnel project was awarded to Judlow TC Electric Joint Venture just over a year ago. And the project includes reconstruction of duct banks and tracks, replacement of all signal and power and communication cabling, construction of a new substation and circuit breaker house at 14th Street and Avenue B, and refurbishment of an existing pump room and circuit breaker house in the tunnel itself, and installation of new entrances and elevators at First Avenue Station in Manhattan and Bedford Avenue Station in Brooklyn. The project is scheduled to achieve substantial completion in November of 2020, while the tunnel is planned for a 15-month closure starting in April 2019. The alternate service plan has been finalized and is being presented to the community. Public outreach will continue throughout the tunnel closure. Up to now, the work has involved relocation of various utilities both in Manhattan along 14th Street near Avenue A and Avenue B, and in Brooklyn along North 7th Street at Bedford and Drigg Avenues, to make room for construction of new entrances and elevators. One of these new entrances at Bedford Avenue was opened in early June. We have received some complaints from local residents at 14th Street about construction noise and have acted to address those concerns as much as possible. For the next 6 months, the contractor will be building the structures for the new entrances at Avenue A and 14th Street, and for the new substation circuit breaker house at Avenue B and 14th Street. In Brooklyn, they will continue building the mezzanine extension, the elevators and stairways at Bedford Avenue Mezzanine, and new stairways at Driggs Avenue Mezzanine. There will be weekend closures between now and the end of the year, as well as next spring, to perform preparatory work for the 15-month tunnel closure, which will begin in April of 2019. The next few slides will show some photos of ongoing work. The photo on the left shows construction of the street elevator shaft at Bedford Avenue in Brooklyn, and the photo on the right shows construction of foundations for the relocated 42-inch sewer at 14th Street. This is construction of the new stairway at Bedford Avenue, which opened. And this is the stairway itself, which opened in early June and has temporary enclosure at the street level since work is still ongoing. There will be 4 new stairways at Bedford, and we will be rehabilitating 4 existing stairways, which will double the entering and exiting capacity at Bedford. The photo on the left shows the jet grouting operation for the installation of the shafts and the new entrance at Avenue A at 14th Street. And the photo on the right shows installation of steel structures for the relocation of the sewer. And here is the sewer cradle and the actual pipes that are going to be installed. Project milestones are on schedule except for the Avenue B substation milestone, which has encountered some delays. The dust collection system was successfully tested in January, and procurement of the long lead materials and equipment is on schedule. Milestone 3 for signal work and milestone 6 for temporary cabling will be performed on the weekend service diversions that I mentioned earlier. The construction of the structure for the substation circuit breaker house at Avenue B has encountered some delays, as I mentioned, due to unexpected ground conditions and soil conditions, which have slowed the installation of the support of excavation. The project team is looking at ways to mitigate this delay, which does not impact the tunnel closure or its reopening. The Myrtle Line Viaduct and Bridge project was issued to rehabilitate a century-old segment of the M line, which will be a major alternate route for the L line customers when the tunnel is closed. The viaduct and the bridge structures were replaced, and the M line was reopened as scheduled at the end of April this year. The project remains on schedule and within budget. Here are some photos of the existing and new structures at Myrtle. I will pass it on to Sonia now.
Good afternoon. The Clifton Shop design build is a design and construction of the new railcar maintenance shop for Staten Island. This design build was awarded in December 2016. There's a couple of firsts for this design build. This is the first design build where we are keeping the existing shop in operation during construction whilst we build the new shop, and then we go ahead and will demolish the old shop. It is also a first for the contractor working with New York City Transit. This is the Prismatic Development's first job. The new shop will be designed and built for Category 2 hurricane resilient. It's a 43-month construction. The phased construction will keep the shop operational, so there will be no impact to the ridership. This slide shows the ongoing work. The items highlighted in green has been demolished. It is the paint and the diesel shop. The contractor's current schedule, update 1, shows a 58-day delay. The contractor has had a learning curve working with New York City Transit. About 3 weeks of the delay can be attributed to the submissions of the environmental documentation needed. There are several permits needed. Naturally occurring asbestos placard, lead placard, in exploratory boring packages, contaminated soil permit, just to name a few. Therefore, the asbestos work started 3 weeks later once we got the placard in place, and this subsequently delayed the pile driving activities, which projected a 4 weeks delay. The current schedule for completion, substantial schedule, is October 2020. The highlights of the project. All design packages have been submitted. The construction permit, the slide mentions 3, but 4 packages have been submitted. The 4th one came last week. The 5th package is supposed to be coming at the end of this month. Construction permit will be issued. The start of construction has been delayed for the environmental package submissions. Therefore, all delays have been cascaded. As this is a design build, the designer of record is required to do samples of the soil prior to its disposal. The contract states that all soil is 100% petroleum contaminated with the inclusion of naturally occurring asbestos in the soil. The contractor also requires that the contractor test the soil prior to its disposal. The environmental borings reveal that the soil has hazardous material, so there's heavy metal in the soil. The contractor is gearing up for the disposal of this hazardous soil with our assistance. What's happened recently, since the last couple of weeks, we've been able to get all the permits required, the safety plan in place, and the pile driving activities started as of July 2018. The critical milestones list a cascading effect. The first milestone was on time. However, subsequent to the delay of the asbestos removal work, there's been a 3-month delay, and the entire delay, since it's linear, is cascading. As mentioned previously, this is the contractor's first project with the New York City Transit and their first design build too. We will be continuing to provide assistance on each and every step as we have. With the discovery of the hazardous soil, there could be an additional delay. However, we are working with the contractor for a recovery schedule, and we will have more information in the next meeting. As mentioned, we've started pile driving as of this Friday, so it is a good news. And this being a phased construction, there will be no impact for the ridership.
Are there any questions before we move on to the independent engineer? Okay, there being none. Cesar, on the L train.
A few words on the Myrtle Line Viaduct and bridge replacement. The IAC would like to commend New York City Transit and MTA Real Estate for their efforts in achieving all the scheduled completion dates while remaining on budget. This complex project's completion is needed to maintain service for New York City Transit riders during the L Line tunnel closure. L Tunnel reconstruction. The report begins on page 28 of your CPOC books. The agency's presentation is accurate reflection of the schedule and budget, as well as a realistic assessment of the risk and proposed mitigations. The IC has two concerns we'd like to highlight. While the agency has developed a mitigation plan and is actively implementing it, the IC is concerned that jet routing work for the substation foundation could affect the Avenue B substation completion date. The IEC understands that the tunnel could be reopened before this substation is completed. A budget modification was made to the project. The new budget will now be $926 million. The IEC is concerned that there is a potential schedule impacts with this modification. The IEC recognizes that neither issue will affect the tunnel shutdown. This concludes my report.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner.
Could you please explain jet grouting? Somebody.
I'll do it. It's where cementitious material is injected into the ground to create a kind of a concrete base, but it's not a regular concrete because it's mixed with ground, but it creates a base which is strong enough to prevent the water from percolating up, and it also strengthens the side walls of the excavation so they don't cave in.
I'm done. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Now we're going to hear about the IEC report on the Clifton Shop. Diane?
Good afternoon. My report on Clifton Shop begins on page 32 of your book. The agency's written report accurately represents the current status of the project budget and schedule. We do have some concerns about issues that may impact the upcoming construction phase. My written report includes several specific recommendations on risk response strategies and project controls, which are intended to assist the project going forward. And the project team has informed us that they've already begun implementing some aspects of these recommendations. And that concludes my remarks.
Good afternoon. We last reported to the board in February. However, many of you have been closely monitoring the progress of this project through the monthly committee meetings. So you've been keeping up to date on what has been transpiring on the project. During the past 5 months, we've done a lot of testing, both in the field and in the factory. And although we've counted some bumps in the road, we're on target to meet all federal compliance requirements at the end of the year. This means we're on target to have acquired all our necessary spectrum, install all pertinent hardware, have our training programs in place, train sufficient number of employees, and to have our pilot lines in revenue service demonstration. Both railroads are currently engaged in site performance testing, generating data in support of our RSD application. Final integrated software is due immediately in advance of our RSD application submission. Without knowing FRA's review time period, which gates our ability to get into RSD, it's hard to give you exact dates on when we will commission the remaining segments. But we fully intend to work at full throttle once RSD is accepted and federal compliance is met to roll out the remaining segments. We are currently working on that rollout schedule for the non-pilot segments based on certain FRA assumptions, and we'll be updating the committees accordingly.
Commissioner Zuckerman.
Thanks, Debbie. The tour you gave us for those in Metro North, I think, brought a newfound sense of the complexity. Complex not only in the system, but simply just even run the testing. So thank you for that, and I realize just taking us out there that day itself was a complicated endeavor to run the test. I do want to hit one of your points, though. Can you give us a rough sense, post the FRA approval, which I realize is a good problem to have when they say that we accept your RSD, how long after that gun going off that they say, yes, you've accomplished all these steps, we've reviewed your process, how much longer from that can we expect to have full revenue service across Metro North, at least east of Hudson? I'd like to get a sense in my head, because originally, knowing it was always a very difficult milestone, we had aspirations, not expectations, but aspirations for the end of this year to have it fully implemented. I am not suggesting that is a reasonable piece, and we'll hear from the IEC in a minute about just the current plan, but I'm trying to get a sense in my head for how far after approval from the FRA we can expect to have this implemented, which is what and I realize it's many pieces, PTC, it's not one thing. We'll have fully civil speed enforcement soon enough, but I'm just trying to get a sense how much longer from FRA approval will we actually then have it fully implemented?
So I'm gonna hedge a little bit because we're still working on the alternative schedule. We are marshaling our own and third-party resources to try to get the various segments cut in as expeditiously as possible. I think the trip that the Metro North Committee took on the train, I think, conveys the complexity and how we have to, make sure that not only is it implemented safely, but that it works with the operation. And for each segment, we have a site test procedure in place. We're going to try to cut in multiple segments at once. So we're still in the process of working through the schedule. We will, as part of our monthly briefings of the Metro North Committee and the subgroup on PTC, continue to keep you up to date. But, rest assured, as you know, we're going to try to do it as aggressively as possible because we have to, because that's the expectation.
My concern still is the interoperability with Amtrak. It's one of my concerns, especially between Harold and Penn Station. I see that Long is preparing to get an agreement as far as how to operate, but I'm still concerned about actually getting it done and whether we'll have PTC in that section of the railroad come December, because that's part of the Port Washington branch, correct? I mean, do we plan to have PTC ready for Harold to Penn Station at that time?
Interoperability with Amtrak, as defined by the regulation, won't be available at the end of the year.
Okay. I mean, but Amtrak, PTC will not be in effect in that area at all, right, whether for our trains or Amtrak trains. Is that correct?
Amtrak is still working on designs for F-Tower location. We are working for that interface to occur, and they actually have a change in their safety service solution, which they just recently told us about. So we're actually working with them right now, and their target is sometime next year to have that safety server available to us. And we're actually working together right now on that interface design.
Okay. That sounds good. Just for the record, that's where Amtrak is. Next time we hear them say something about you can't operate on our railroad unless you have PTC. Thanks.
Question: there is no, there won't be PTC between Harold and through the tunnel into Penn Station. Isn't that correct? It's not.
No, I mean not right now, but we have to have PTC in operation.
I thought in the tunnels it would never be needed.
Well, not into the terminal. I mean,
okay, in the holding. Okay, right. I got it. Thanks. Any other questions? Nope.
Okay, so next slide. This is the dashboard that you're used to looking at. Since February, we've made some significant progress in hardware installations, more than a 10% increase. In training, at least for Long Island Railroad, we increased by 20%. Metro North increased by 10%. And in the RSD area, 17 to 18% increase. So we're moving ahead. We're still on target to be in compliance at the end of the year. The next slide is also something familiar to you. As a reminder, the green box is where we meet the
Could you please define, for everybody's benefit, compliance?
PTC compliance has the 4 criteria which identified by the circles, the left-hand circles, to have our radio spectrum acquired, the necessary radio spectrum that we need. All of the installation hardware installed for the office, wayside, and onboard the trains. Training programs in place and sufficient number of employees trained to support revenue service demo, and to have our pilot lines in revenue service demonstration. That's what's necessary to be in compliance by the end of the year. Okay, in June, Long Island Railroad reached their FRE goal for the installations of the DEDM fleet. We also made significant progress on the installations on our E15 and C3 fleet. This table since February has been updated to include hardware projections for New York and Atlantic Railway. Through clarification from the FRA, we were told that we need to include the installations for our tenant railroads. Anyone who's umbrellaed under our implementation plan must be included in the hardware installation total, so we added them. We've also included, just for information as far as the contract, the M3s on this table, since we exercised this contract option in June. LIR anticipates we'll need the M3s for spare ratio and as a safety net should we need to increase capacity in the near future due to the delays in the delivery of the M9s. The next 2 slides are Metro North's installation progress. For east of Hudson, Metro North has made notable progress in the installation of their onboard installations for the M3s, P32, cab cars, and the M8 fleet. For west of Hudson, their installation numbers are dependent on New Jersey Transit, who's providing Metro North with the PTC design and equipment. And this month, Metro North got some of their communication equipment deliveries from New Jersey Transit, and so they'll be starting their installations for that equipment this month. I won't go through bullet by bullet on this list. This is the progress that we've made over the course of the last 5 months. But the key highlights to note since February are we achieved the final design milestone in May, which eliminates the risk of the railroads having to make any major system design changes or hardware changes. We've had a very successful office pre-factory acceptance test for release 3.0, which includes wireless security functionality as well as a roadway worker protection system for Long Island Railroad. A 95% success rate is a significant improvement from our experience from past efforts of factory acceptance testing. And just last week, we completed our office FAT, which had the same level of success. The integrated system factory acceptance test for the new baseline software 3.0 started last week. This is the software release that we need to successfully complete RSD, and the expected completion is in late August. Specifically for Long Island Railroad, these are some of the accomplishments for the reporting period. Long Island Railroad started their formal site performance testing on both their pilot lines, Port Washington and our Babylon to Patchogue pilot segment. We completed the testing with the preliminary system baseline 2.3 last week. And considering having entered into SPT with known core variances, for which several test cases had to be deferred, and also having opened many new variances during SPT, we're working with the contractor to ensure that the required software corrections are made expeditiously. How quickly and successful the contractor is able to identify the root cause of these software issues and then make the required software corrections will determine how successful we are and positioned to get into RSD on our pilot lines. So just to give you a little idea, I mean, we basically deferred approximately 30% of the test cases for this testing. Taking that into account, 65% of the test cases actually passed, and we had about a 6% failure rate. This slide shows the accomplishments for Metro North for the reporting period. As you can see, Metro North made significant progress since February in getting their entire fleet in civil speed enforcement operations. They completed their site integrated testing, site installation testing on their radio cases and their wayside interface units, and implemented full functionality for their transponders for PTC. So they actually also started their site performance testing this month on the Hudson line, and they will complete that effort in approximately a couple of weeks. So far, I understand that they're also pretty successful in what they saw as far as their testing. And you guys were on the train, so you saw some of that.
Yeah, no, you actually were on a test run, so it was an official test run.
The next two slides show the software development and test schedule for both Long Island Railroad and Metro North. And although we both took kind of different paths to getting to integrated system factory acceptance tests for baseline 3, our schedules have started to converge again, and we're on the same schedule to submit our respective RSD applications in early September and to start RSD in mid-October on our pilot lines. We've allotted on the schedule approximately 40 days for the FRA to approve our application, and expect that hopefully by within a 6-week period we should be able to get our approval to start revenue service demonstration on those lines. Both railroads will have an opportunity to start their site performance testing on their non-pilot lines as early as August if we get the integrated software release that we're expecting. But the railroads will have to be able to successfully demonstrate safe and reliable PTC operations on the pilot lines for a certain number of successful runs in order to obtain FRA approval, and to also extend the approval for RSD on the non-pilot segments. So this could take, right now we don't know what the definition of what that is. We're waiting, we won't know until we submit our application and we get our approval, and then the FRA will then inform us how many successful runs they expect us to run. But what we've done, and I know Kathy's mentioned this, and we've actually submitted a white paper to the FRA giving them some number of runs based on, I think, roughly a 90-something% success rate, yeah. Based on this schedule, you can see that the rollout of the non-pilot lines can only start as early as mid-December, assuming that, we have to be in RSD on the pilot lines for roughly 2 months. The next few slides are the risk and mitigation slides. We'll be talking pretty endlessly about these at the committee meeting, so I won't weigh you down on a lot of the details. The focus right now for the risks have been shifted towards achieving compliance at the end of the year, as we know that the full PTC implementation will take a little bit longer. For this particular slide, one of the key areas that we're looking and watching is the SI. They have recently increased the number of their factory testers to support 2 full shifts and weekends through the completion of integrated system FAT. And although it appears to be pretty positive, the important thing to note is that the new testers, in order to ramp up, they need a little bit more time to kind of understand the system. They're still new, and the railroads will need to closely monitor the SI's progress to ensure that the staffing level is appropriate to support the project schedule. And thus far, it's been a pretty challenging effort on our part.
And just to Debbie's point, both railroads have personnel out in Pittsburgh, essentially full-time, as well as consultant support to supplement the resources that the SI is bringing to bear.
To mitigate the risk of applying access to Metro North and Long Island Railroad's operational density, we are acquiring additional spectrum. We anticipate that this request will go to the board in September for the procurement of this additional spectrum, and we feel that this will provide some mitigation for potential radio frequency interference issues once we turn everything on and we're completely commissioned our PTC system system-wide. The railroads continue to have concerns with the SI's ability to provide the necessary expertise and resources to support the project, and we are closely monitoring this area, like I had said. We're having bi-weekly meetings with the executive staff to ensure the project stays on schedule. To Ira's point here with Amtrak, we're working pretty closely with them on a weekly basis to discuss interoperability. Metro-North has their letter of understanding signed by Amtrak and themselves, and Long Island Railroad has submitted our letter of understanding over to Amtrak for their review, and it looks like we're pretty close to signing off on it. Like I had said, they had a recent change in management. They recently also migrated to a new safety service solution, but the railroads are working pretty closely with them to try to get our technical agreements in place by the end of the month. And but that hasn't stopped us from sitting down, discussing our designs, and also discussing implementation strategy right now. So that's not really holding up any progress. The railroads continue to anticipate the need to support simultaneous commissioning of our non-pilot segments, and have already planned track access outages based on the current schedule, should the software provided in August prove to be reliable. So once we initiate RSD on the pilot lines, we are both ready to start testing commissioning multiple line segments at a time. Metro-North and Long Island are also working with AFTR and the FRA to coordinate the number of documents requiring FRA approval. Actually, the FRA held a symposium in June to provide information and clarification to the railroad industry on the PTC statutory requirements for 2018, which was very helpful. And at that session, the FRA introduced the option for substitute criteria. In lieu of the fourth criterion to get into RSD, the FRA has the authority to approve a substitute criteria. It's all a matter of the railroad submitting a formal letter to the FRA, identifying what that substitute criteria is, and based on a case-by-case basis, they're reviewing those requests and approving them. Since there's no downside to that, we see that as we're concurrently considering this option, and we see this as a mitigation measure as well as a way to get into compliance sooner.
Could you elaborate, please, what that would mean? Because I don't know what that means, an alternate to having the thing work on the line itself. What is an alternative criteria? Give me an example of one.
Substitute criteria for, so we're thinking about it. And so for Long Island Railroad, we have 19 miles of the Port Washington line that we have to get into revenue service demonstration, as well as, I think, 13 miles of the Babylon to Patchogue segment, which is roughly 30 miles of track. For substitute criteria, what we're looking at is to try to find a representative track segment on the Port Washington line, probably a shorter segment of it, like a 10-mile segment. And should we run, the problem is if we run into any major critical variance along the way, even all the way at the end, we may not have enough time to recover. And so this gives us a means to be able to be in compliance without getting fully into RSD. So what we're doing is we're taking our master test program for RSD for our pilot lines and finding a point in time along that test program where we feel that, like right now, we're already, like Long Island Road has already done their site performance testing with a preliminary version of our baseline software. So we already have records to show that we can demonstrate our functionality for all the required PTC functions. We can also show the interfaces are working to give the FRA some confidence that our hardware design is tied down, our system design is tied down so that we don't have any major changes. And so we're looking at that to be able to provide that to the FRA. And this is something that a lot of the other railroads are also entertaining. We know New Jersey submitted an application to try to do that. And but this is in no means for us. I mean, we are seriously going forward to RSD. This is really it's a security blanket. This is like insurance policy. And this is something that the FRA has pretty much endorsed. They're pushing us to consider submitting it. So should we submit an application, like say today, most likely would get approved sometime in August. That's roughly the same time that we would expect to get our data to run to submit for our application. And we may or may not get in, depends on what the FRA is looking for. And they may, we may run into some variance that we haven't corrected. That buys us a little bit more time. It's also on the path to RSD, so it's not like we're distracting anyone from going to a different line. So there's really no downside to it. Just something we're considering. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. If I may try in alternative words, not just alternative criteria, are you saying that in lieu of actually RSD, which I take to mean we can show it works over a certain physical period of space and time? That's what I mean. I think RSD means. We're demonstrating that it can actually work. And you're saying we're going to use a set of criteria that is the pieces potentially, not RSD itself, but pieces of it to get FRA approval. So in parallel, we can implement it.
Well, right now we can already demonstrate that the PTC works. What we need to work on is demonstrated safe and reliably.
Yes, I get that.
Repetitively.
Yes.
And that's the
But you're
part.
saying the alternative criteria would actually not be necessarily the repetitively part of it.
Exactly, and also the reliability of it. So right now we can demonstrate, say like we have a function called it's not a safety function, but it's accurate stop at every station, and we can do that at say like maybe two of the stations and maybe not the other three based on the configuration of the station and where the signal is at the end of the platform.
Well, look, I've said many times before on this topic, I care far less about what the federal government wants to see and much more about getting the system in place so riders have a safe and reliable experience. So if you feel you need to have an earlier approval from the federal government on the components, but it doesn't hamper, in fact, it maybe even supports and accelerates your driving of implementing this for ourselves, then you have at least this person's support. If, on the other hand, this becomes a nod to a less full implementation of PTC because we've received a lesser set of steps, but we satisfy the FRA, then I'm less excited about that.
Debbie, I just wanted to speak up for a second. I mean, it's really certainly not the latter. I mean, I think that regardless of how we proceed over the course of the next several months, we are going to have our pilot segments in RSD. So this is really a strategy that we only just became aware of not that long ago, I would say within the last 3 or 4 months, when I think, at least I became aware of it when New Jersey Transit put in their application for substitute criteria. This is essentially a way of being able to tick that RSD box a little bit earlier. So really a risk mitigation strategy for purposes of compliance, but it doesn't in any way affect what the rollout is going to look like or ultimately the overall safety of the system.
Things. First of all, when I first heard about the alternate, I objected to the word alternate because it's not that you're doing less, it's that you're doing it on a different schedule and a different length, as your example gave, but there are other ways to do it as well.
Which I think is why FRA is now referring it to as substitute criteria and not alternate
criteria.
My
goodness.
So I think they have the same concern as yours.
We moved the
yes.
FRA.
Yeah.
Okay. The second thing is, as you know, we had a lengthy discussion at Metro North about on-time performance. And one of the reasons we've had difficulties with the on-time performance is that you've had multiple tracks out of service for multiple different track work.
Well, and also the onboard installations as well for PTC purposes have really cut into our margin.
We've got cars gone.
Car availability, yeah.
When you go in, when we get through RSD and FRA says we can go ahead on all the segments, your plan at present is to take more than one segment out of service at a time. I think you need to look at that again in view of today's earlier discussion, because that will cause additional on-time performance issues, and we already know that some of the other properties across the nation are having difficulties maintaining their service while they're going through testing on PTC.
Well, we've been warned. We've been warned by other systems who are a little bit ahead of us in terms of the impacts upon on-time performance and the need to sort of bake some time into the schedule to be able to address potential addition of running time related to the PTC functionality. So that's something that other systems are seeing, so we're very mindful of that as well.
Please make the committee aware of it before we experience it on our trains.
Absolutely.
Okay. Any further questions? Go on.
All right, so this slide provides a quick overview of the PTC timeline during the reporting period. I won't go into any more details. This next slide is the look ahead of milestones for the PTC project until we meet again in October. By October, we plan to complete all necessary hardware installations and training. We also have conducted all required field testing to provide the data to support our RSD application. That includes reliability testing, which will show how we can run multiple trains on the pilot lines to repeatedly demonstrate safe and reliable PTC operations. And by meeting the criteria for compliance, the railroads will be in a position to submit a written notification to the FRA stating that we have met our statutory requirements, that we can provide the artifacts that demonstrate that we're in statutory compliance. And then at that point is when we would qualify for an alternative schedule. And that would basically mean that would give us more time to commission our non-pilot segments, to get our safety plan approved, and also to complete interoperability with any of our tenant railroads. The next two slides provides the look ahead by month. The key project milestones to look at is Metro North will complete their training in July. Long Island Railroad would have all of their training modules delivered for compliance by August. The version of the integrated system software required for RSD will be submitted in August, and we'll also be able to submit our RSD application in September. And then in October, both railroads will have their pilot lines in RSD. Hardware installations will be complete. Long Island Railroad will complete their training. And then, like I had said, in November, we would be in a position to submit our written notification to the FRA, stating that we've met all our statutory requirements. And lastly, due to the high volume of documents that the FRA anticipates getting in the third and fourth quarter of the year, they've made a recommendation to the railroads to all the railroads who are looking to get RSD approvals to hold off on submitting their safety plan for approval, and we have agreed to do that. So we'll be submitting our safety plan sometime in 2019. We've already worked on it. It's the RSD application is a mini version. The safety plan is a part of that. It's already a mini version, so we're well on getting that document ready. And since the FRA takes up to 180 days to approve the safety plan, we need to submit it fairly early in 2019. So that basically concludes my presentation. The next few slides are a bunch of pictures. If you have any questions, I'm ready to answer any of them.
Are there any questions? More questions? No? Nabil?
Good afternoon. Report. The IEC report for the PTC project can be found on page 64 of the book. Overall, the project made good progress since the last report to CPOC in February. The agency presentation provides an accurate status of the project, including budget and schedule, as well as a realistic assessment of remaining risks and proposed mitigations. However, the IEC would like to emphasize two risks that the project team has identified. First, one of the predecessors to revenue service demonstration, which is on the critical path, is for the contractor to complete the development and testing of the final version of the PTC software. The current schedule is highly dependent on the successful completion of this effort. Second, as a result of the 3 months delay to the start of site performance testing, there is limited time left for remaining activities, which include getting approval from the FRA to start the revenue service demonstration on the pilot lines. If any of these activities is delayed, it could have an adverse impact on the current schedule. This concludes IEC presentation.
Thank you, Nabil. Any questions? Yes,
Just
Susan?
a quick one. Kathy, I know that you're going to come to the board for additional bandwidth. I know you have enough now, but this is a safety precaution. Will that be an additional addition to the budget?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it a lot?
I don't know. I think we're still negotiating.
Is it? Yeah, I know. Is there an auction that for the spectrum?
No, it wasn't. It was a negotiation.
Okay. Right. No further questions? Okay. Now we're on to the capital program status report.
Okay.
Ronnie Hakem.
Thank you. The report begins on page 71 of your materials. In sum, on commitments, through June, the MTA achieved 19 out of the 43 of the planned major commitments. 4 major commitments are delayed but are still expected to be done this year. Through June, we've committed $2.8 billion versus a $4.0 billion year-to-date goal, but again, anticipate meeting those commitment goals. In terms of completions, we plan a total of $6.3 billion in completions, including 39 major completions that will track throughout the year. Through June, the MTA has achieved 5 major completions, and while 7 of those planned are delayed, they're still expected to be completed by the end of the year. And that means that we have completed $1.6 billion through June versus $2.2 billion of the year-to-date goal. And that completes my report.
There being none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Seconded? All right. Thank you very much. Audit committee starts momentarily.